Welcome everybody
Welcome.
to Staying on Top of the Wave. Um, yeah, welcome. That's our subject.
Our main theme is how optimism and the power of positivity enhance productivity and lifelong learning.
So to start, we will touch on COVID since that's the topic of the year, and that's really a good struggle that we can all kind of relate with. Um, COVID life is different, and I think we all know that, especially having to do school right now, maybe having to deal with work or families and how all of those things have changed. I know that it's definitely very hard. Sometimes isolation feels like it drains motivation and happiness. Sometimes I'm sitting at home and I'm like, oh, I'm not having fun today. I know in-person community connection is something that we're all missing. It's really easy to just stay stuck inside and not want to go outside because that's the norm now. It's easy to say, I'll stay inside, or let's do a Zoom meeting instead, or I'm just going to hang out. I'll just sit and do my homework in my room, whatever it is. And so it's a whole new lifestyle that we're all adapting to. And it can be really difficult. Because of that, because we're stuck at home, other people don't see us as often as they used to. And that just means we have to see ourselves a little bit more. So our presentation is going to feel a little wholesome. It's a little bit more there for you to think, for you to share stories. Lena and I are going to share some stories, but this is really kind of a reflective time where we can look at ourselves and see ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. I know a lot of people weren't expecting the coronavirus, but here we are. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about is the psychology aspect of positivity and optimism. And so I wanted to ask this quick question, and why is positivity important? And so I know like a lot of you guys have exams, homework. I had an exam yesterday and it was definitely a long time. The one thing that positivity is important is because it reduces stress. And so being positive, being optimistic could be a key to stress management. The next thing is that it decreases health issues. So being positive could really decrease like your health risks and um, stuff like that. And then the third thing is self affirmation. And so I know it's a little goofy, but self affirmation is having that positive effect on message. So being able to maybe even go in front of a mirror and say, oh, I feel great today, or doing like a voice memo and saying, I'm going to do great today, I feel great. And stuff like that could really help with positivity. And so obviously we did some research. We didn't want to post like a whole 2-page article for you guys to read. So we posted some quotes here, and we're going to give you like a few minutes if you guys want to go ahead and read them.
All right. Give you guys a couple more seconds to read through those. That's really just the heft behind our presentation. We did a little bit of research, so we know what we're talking about, mostly. All right. And we will move on to story time. So Lena and I are both going to introduce ourselves a little bit further, tell some stories about some of the experiences in our lives, um, and apply positivity and optimism in moments kind of like COVID that are not necessarily the way that you would want them to go. Um, so again, my name is Andrew Moore. I'm the president of the Alpha Mu Mu chapter of Phi Theta Kappa at Community College of Denver. I'm a big mountain junkie. I love being outside, mountain biking, hiking, and I'm kind of a workaholic, but I love it. Work is a lot of fun too. So, so I'm going to start by sharing a camp story, and that photograph there is a sunset photograph up at Camp Chief URA near Winter Park. It's a YMCA camp, and that's where I went every year of my childhood during the summer. So my junior year I was a little bit more bittersweet about camp. I was going up there for a program that was a full 3 weeks long. And to me, that sounded like a long time. I was like, oh my gosh, that's a whole third of my summer. What, like, I'm gonna miss out on so much. Um, but that's okay. I definitely got over that bittersweet feeling really fast. You know, you get up there, it's beautiful. You're like, oh, fresh air. I can smell the smells of the mountains, and I can hear the birds chirping and the deer in the valley. Um, so that year, the program I signed up for was called Specialist in Training. And that was a 3 week program. You spent a 1 week mountain biking, 1 week rafting, 1 week backpacking. And the rafting and mountain biking parts of that trip were pretty easy for me. I had been rafting multiple times, and I was a member of my high school's mountain biking team, where I actually raced. And so those 2 weeks kind of flew by. They were fun. We did all the camp stuff, sat around the campfire, shared stories, grew, learned. But then we got to the third week, and the third week we went backpacking. Um, I love backpacking now because of this experience and this trip. It's one of my favorite things to do every summer. And so most years, I'll jump back into camp a little bit. Most years, our camp had always reserved a route in Rocky Mountain National Park. And for those of you who haven't been to Rocky Mountain National Park, it's absolutely gorgeous. There's tons and tons of wildlife and foliage and trees and grasses. It's very green. And there's water all over the place. There are snow melt streams here and there. And so it's a really easy, fun place to backpack. But this year, camp wasn't able to secure that permit for Rocky Mountain National Park. So we went to Pike National Forest instead. And Pike National Forest is in an area in the mountains, also known as Buffalo Creek. If you guys are unfamiliar with that, it's kind of down 285, so a different direction than Winter Park. But about 3 years prior to my trip up here, Buffalo Creek had experienced a wildfire, and so it was mostly burn scar that occupied the area, which meant that those snow melt streams were gone because the mountains weren't retaining that snow for as long. It was very hot and dry. There was not very much shade. And so that made backpacking a totally different experience from what I had ever done before. Um, we had been hiking along for our trip. It wasn't too bad. But on our third day, it really got hard. We had a 12-mile day ahead of us. We packed up camp just like any day, had breakfast, kind of did our thing, smiled for the morning, threw everything in our bags, hopped on the trail, and went hiking. And we hiked for about 7 miles before we got lunch or stopped for lunch. And then we stopped for lunch, and I was kind of quiet. It was unlike me. I'm a very talkative person. And so for me to sit there and be kind of quiet and just eat, kind of really just showed how defeated I felt. I felt really, really defeated after this day because my shoulders hurt, my feet were tired, I was hot, and we were carrying water. So our backpacks were a lot heavier than they normally are. Um, and I don't know, I really didn't feel like I was having fun, which to me was really sad because the camp experience in that time is my favorite time of the year. Um, and so that's kind of anyone can experience a tough day kind of like that. It happens, it's normal. But it's about how you deal with it that really changes your experience. And I found in this day particular is the end of the day that really, really helped. So this next slide has a pre-camp photo of my best friend Taylor and I. We always take these goofy pre-camp photos when we get out to camp. But Taylor will come into play shortly here. So by the time at the end of that day, we plopped our bags down and had hiked the rest of the 12 miles that we had to after lunch, we were exhausted, like brutally exhausted. We all kind of just laid there, I think, for 10 minutes on our backpacks on the ground, wherever. Um, I don't think any of us really wanted to make dinner. We didn't really want to do anything. I think we all kind of just wanted to sleep and smell the air and not have something on our backs or be on our feet. So, despite that feeling of exhaustion, we still sat around in a circle and kind of started reflecting. It kind of looked like, sharing what we enjoyed about the day, what was challenging, what we want to change, what a dream activity for the day would have been, things like that. It was kind of normal camp reflection experiences were there for sure. And so we took that and everyone shared, and in the circle we got around to my friend Taylor. And he said something along the lines of, at least we were entertained by little things like rocks and lizards, new terrain, new landscapes, snack breaks. um, and even though that sounds really simple, it's something that kind of changed the way I think about experiences that might be tough. I kind of thought about, oh, like it wasn't that bad. There are things that could have entertained me. I mean, look at what my friend Taylor was thinking about rather than how hot it was or how heavy his backpack was. And so that was a little eye-opening. It made me realize there are little things you can control all the time. There's so much you're in control of. And so that made me think that you can control the way you think about things and what you think about, where you focus your attention. Anyways, the next day we continued hiking through the burn scar. It was our second day. We had another 12 miles to go. But this time we played games like Telephone and I Spy and had fun and distracted ourselves kind of. Those games were a good thing to occupy our minds. The next day, that day flew by, and before we knew it, we were setting up camp again, making dinner, laughing, sitting around the campfire. And so that change in mindset and that adoption of positivity really made everything so much better. And I'll pass it off to Lena for her story now.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I know this summer my mom went to mountains and there were rattlesnakes. And thankfully she didn't hear them. I know if I was there, I would have ran to all the way to Canada. But yeah, anyways, hello guys, my name is Lena. I'm the Vice President of Leadership in Phi Theta Kappa. So me and Andrew work very close together. I'm also the SSAC Vice Chair in Student Government Association. So we came together to plan this wonderful conference, and I really enjoyed you guys to come. So woohoo, story time. Who doesn't love a good story? Okay. It was a dark, stormy night in a cave. Just kidding. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was summertime and it was time to plan out my trip. I was going to Libya, a country in North Africa, to visit my family. For me, visiting my family is a big thing for me. I love to gain wisdom and education from my grandparents. Gathering the suitcases. Oh, am I muted?
No, I can hear you. I've heard your whole speaking this whole time. That might be an issue just directly with his audio.
Okay. Anyways, I was gathering my suitcases, my appliances, my toothbrush, everything that you could think of. Obviously, I didn't have masks during that time, but definitely now if I travel, I would bring a mask. So when I visited the country, it was going through a hard time. So Libya was not in a good position politically. The government was shattered. It was very unstable. Political divisions, two leaders fighting for one throne. It resulted in challenges over 200,000 people. And so it was definitely unsafe and we had to be very cautious. So having that hard time, it was definitely a wide opening experience. We definitely wanted to help and make an impact. So during that time, my sister and I were activists. And so as you could see here, we gathered around, brought some people, brought our friends, our families, and really discussed the country and its issues. So sometimes I remember even schools were shut down. My cousins weren't able to go. Months and months they stayed off for school, and that wasn't really a good thing because they could lose that rich education. And so I was a part of an organization called Makers of Hope. And this was an organization that met together to really strengthen the resilience in Libya and find the solution. And so we gathered around, put our heads together, made plans, talked a little, had some fun times. And I just really enjoyed seeing the students' faces light up with joy and learning new things. And in this experience, I gained valuable skills, leadership, communication, because obviously they weren't really strong in English, so I had to talk to them in a different language. And while we'll go to the fun time now. And so while I was visiting Libya, I was hitting a big stone in my milestone in my life. So I was going to be 16, yay, sweet 16. So while Libya was going through hard times, the funny thing is that electricity was shared. And so let me explain that concept a little bit more. Basically, not every area had electricity 24/7. So hence when one city had electricity, the other didn't. And so it was pretty crazy. And it was definitely challenging in the dark. Sometimes I fell down and my baby cousin would cry, and sometimes he would fall down or things would get knocked over. And the other thing is that it was very humid. So having the electricity cut off and no air conditioning, I had to walk around the house with a fan 24/7. And so, however, we did manage. And so my 16th birthday was around the corner. We were preparing cakes, decorations, talking around about plans, etc. And we were just really hoping that the electricity wouldn't cut off, because just imagine me drying my hair and boom, the electricity is gone. I didn't want to go like poofy to my birthday. And so thankfully the electricity didn't shut off during the day. And so the birthday started, it was fun. We were gathered around, talking, eating cake. And soon enough, it came nighttime. And guess what happened? The electricity was cut off. And so that was very different. But however, there must be a positive outlook. And so as you can see here in this picture, we gathered some glow sticks, glow necklaces, glow balloons, and we had a glow party. And with electricity being off, I looked at it in a positive way. And this was definitely a night to remember. Okay, well, thank you for listening to our stories. And now I'm going to put it into perspective. So we're going to see how our stories really relate to positivity. Okay, so looking at my story, the key tool was focusing on positive thinking. Being in a country who lacks water, electricity, stability, it was definitely challenging, but there's always going to be those breaks in the streets, and it's how you really see things and how you want to dictate your life. And the other tool is looking at what you have. So having my 16th birthday in the dark, it was definitely one thing that I wasn't expecting. It just went poof, dark time. But I had my friends, my family, my sister. There was still cake, there was still sweets. It turned out to be a glow party. And so I always look at what is in front of you, is what I wanted to capture from that story. Take it away.
Then jumping back to my camp story, I have a couple tools that I gathered from that I use to stay positive now. And one of them is accepting reality. And that sounds kind of pessimistic at first, but that has to do with really looking at what's in front of you, not worrying about what could be or what could happen next. It's kind of being in the moment and living in the present. But also accepting the situation and understanding that, oh, this is how it is now, whether that's great or whether that's mediocre or not exactly how you want it to be. Just knowing that it's not what you want and why it's not what you want is super, super helpful. And part of that reality is the little things like the lizards and rocks and snacks that I talked about in my story. And then another huge tool that I use probably the most often is considering what you can control. And this is kind of a change in mindset as well. And so if you think about, oh, even with COVID, you're like, what can I control? What can't I control? You can control a lot. You can control the way you think about COVID and what you're doing during COVID. I know when COVID hit, I decided to work on my house with my dad, and we did some housework and kind of upgraded the house since it was where I was going to be stuck for the moment. And same thing with that backpacking story. I was able to control my mindset and where my attention was drawn. So I became more concerned with what was going on around me at the moment that was making me happy rather than what was hurting or what was not so much fun. Then we'll jump kind of over to the conference theme and relating that to that. So we called our presentation "Staying on Top of the Wave," and the wave is the wave can be daunting and scary, and you never know. It could be big, it could be small, but staying on top of the wave, I think, is pretty key in a boat.
Yeah, for sure. And that brings us to Our little first tool is do not be pessimistic, instead be optimistic. So definitely you don't want, I know if I go on a boat, I definitely don't want it to sink like the Titanic. And so pessimism is kind of like the key that will kind of sink your boat, kind of like how a rock will sink your boat in real life. So always stay optimistic.
If you think about pessimism too, if you want to compare it to like a rock, it's something that's stuck there and very fixed and it doesn't change. Optimism is more like the boat, and it allows you to kind of move through your day. You get to think about your day in the way you want it to go. And so that pessimism will sink your boat. And then the next tool, or the next kind of little mention here, is using the tools above. If any of you are familiar with sailing or boating or any of that, things break all the time. I know I go to Lake Powell during the summer sometimes with some family friends, and the boats just break. Sometimes they don't want to start one day, or the battery dies, or something happens. And same thing with on a sailboat. There are so many little moving parts that things break, and so you want to use your toolbox, use your tools. And so you want to use the tools, some of the tools that we gave you above. And of course, there are more tools than just those, but think about how to think positively, look at what you have right in front of you, accept reality, and consider what you can control. Those are your tools on your boat of positivity.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, now we've carved in about 15 minutes for you guys to ask questions, comments, and feel free to type it in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask, and even share your stories if you want to. So don't be shy.
This is a great time to share stories. If you guys have any stories similar to ours that kind of made you feel like, oh, I'm not having fun, but I'm gonna find a way to be positive. Caroline
Carolyn
said,
said,
love the idea of changing your mindset. You guys feel free to share. This is totally a safe space, and it's a great place to learn from each other. I don't like only sharing. I like to learn from all of you as well. Go for it, Philip.
Okay, so hang on. Let me turn my camera on real quick.
Perfect.
I should get some popcorn and just listen to you guys' story.
So my name's Philip Benoit. I'm 32 years old, and I'm a student at Pikes Peak Community College. Growing up was hard for me. I'm just going to give you a kind of a brief history of my life, because it's maybe more of a large scale scope of the same type of stories that both of you guys told. Growing up was rough for me. I grew up in inner city Houston. I had a neglectful mother, no father, abusive teachers. Second and third grade, I was not permitted to speak to other children. I was not permitted to go and play at recess. So this really, really affected my upbringing. And on top of that, all the stuff going on at school, at home, I was facing so many other types of abuse. So when I was 7, I was raped by another guy. When I was 11, we got into a car accident with an 18-wheeler on the freeway. Mind you, my aunt that was driving, she had a very small 2-door car. So when the paramedics got there, they walked up leisurely to the accident scene because they thought we were all dead. Luckily, and thank God, there was not a single injury in the car. After high school, all through high school, I was facing this situation of not knowing what to do, not knowing where to go, and living in a state of survival. That state of survival is, I can't remember the guy's name, but he came up with this pyramid of of basically lifestyles that you find yourself in. You have survival mode, and then you have a mode of contentment above that, and then at the peak there's joy and blissful living. It's the hierarchy of needs, and none of my needs were being met. So you know, I didn't know what living was. I didn't know what living was because I wasn't living, I was surviving. After high school, I didn't have any options. My grades were bad, not unexpectedly. So I couldn't go to college. I didn't like the idea of taking out thousands of dollars worth of debt and not even knowing if I would succeed in college, because I certainly hadn't been succeeding in high school. And so my only option was to join the Army. I joined the Army and I went to Korea, and Korea was the first place I found family. I met a group of English teachers in Korea that were from South Africa. And they were some of the most amazing people I have ever met in my life. They took me in because I didn't, as much as I didn't fit in at home, I didn't fit in the Army either. So I did my own thing, and I went out and I explored Korea, and I learned how to speak Korean, and I tried all the different foods, and I volunteered at a university because I was looking for acceptance. And in that situation, I found it. And it was great. I got plugged into a church. There was an English service, and so the English service attracted a lot of international people, and I found out what family was. We had dinner on the weekends. We had trips to the movies, and we went out to eat, and it was great. Then I get sent to Colorado. And so in Colorado, I no longer have that family and support group that I had in Korea. And that was hard. So then I went back to surviving. I took a step forward, and then I took a step back because I didn't have that social circle, which is in that pyramid of needs. You've got to have a support group. People that keep you accountable, and people that aren't afraid to tell you the truth, you know, but at the same time, do it in a way that is full of compassion and love. And so I didn't have that. And so I started searching again and searching again and searching again. And I didn't find it. I couldn't find it because I was so desperate for it. Nobody wanted to really be around me. And it affected the way that I interacted. All of the things that I had experienced up until that point, all of the trauma that I experienced led into shaping this person that was not, I was a square trying to fit into a round hole. I was looking for all these holes, trying to fit into them, and it just wasn't working. Years go by. I get out of the Army and I go back to Houston. I discovered that it's too hot and humid there, and I really liked Colorado, so I came back to Colorado, and I didn't do anything. I couldn't find a job. I was living on a government stipend. And then I went back to Texas because my sister had a car accident. And I was allowing myself to just kind of, the good thing was that I was kind of going with the flow, unknowingly, but it wasn't going with the flow in a boat, like referencing your story. It was going with the flow, just kind of being in the water and not being above it. And sometimes those waves would come over my head. I would get overwhelmed. There were times in my life I wanted to kill myself. There was a period of time, I always had been in therapy, but I had this slew of doctors that just wanted to give me medication after medication after medication. Finally, I said, no more medication. I took a break from therapy. I took a break from seeing the doctors. I took a break from all of that. And I found a job, and the job provided for my needs until it didn't. And then at that point, I was able to find another job. And I started working at Petco, and Petco was amazing. I learned so much about teamwork outside of the Army, because teamwork inside the Army is very different from teamwork and camaraderie that you find in the civilian world. And so there were aspects of the Army that I liked and that I took and said, hey, I want these. And there were aspects of my life that I was like, no, I don't want to go back to that place ever again. And I made a choice. At some point, about 5 years ago, I said, there are certain places in my life that if I find myself heading towards, I will stop myself from getting there before I get it. But I had to recognize what the symptoms were of heading toward, what the flag markers were, what the road signs were. You know, getting depressed, I would find myself isolated, and not being very talkative, and just withdrawing. So I realized that, you know, when I get like that, I need to start forcing myself to do the things that I don't have the energy to do. But when you make the decision to force yourself to do the things that you don't want to do because you just don't have the energy, but you know that they're good for you, that's a pivotal moment in your life. That is life changing, because with so much of the conference that we've gone through, one of the big things was neuroplasticity, and being able to control the things that go on in your mind, learning how to ride on top of that wave. And that first starts with making a decision, to recognize the road signs that you're on a road that's not leading to a good place. Once you recognize those road signs, you can veer off to the right. You can take the exit. And
Certainly.
you know, once you take the exit, then and you're gonna have ups and downs. They're always going to come. But I've been reading this book lately. It's on day trading, but there's a lot of psychology in it. And one of the analogies as he writes about is, and his name is Troy Newman. One of the analogies he writes about, because there's a whole chapter on psychology, is you know, we all face storms. But he referenced it as trees falling in a forest. So you're walking through a forest, and there's going to be trees that fall. But if you can fly above the forest, not only can you see the trees that are falling over in one area, but you can see the other trees that are growing a new swath of forest.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Over here, you may lose an eighth of your forest, but over here, you've grown 2/3 more.
Right.
That's,
Yeah.
I mean, that's my life. That's my spin on positivity, and taking the negative and allowing it to transform you and learn from it. I appreciate the opportunity to share.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. And, you know, to me, it sounded like too, and I mean, you really recognized what was going on in your reality. You eventually, when you said, you know, you were looking at, you know, whether or not you're going down the road that led to something not so good. And to me, that sounds like you recognizing your reality and what's going on in your life. And you know, then you decided to think about what you could control, and that was going down the right road. You know, you could control getting onto that exit ramp. Um, and so you totally did that positivity for sure. You did those actions. Really quick before we take more questions and comments, we have just one last little bit. And I wanted to share this with you. You know, you've heard some stories from us. You heard Philip's story, which was phenomenal. And that's kind of all small stuff. You know, that's very specific stuff. No need to worry about it, Philip. But things that
Yeah.
you can do right now.
I really
Oh no, yeah. So some things you can do right now are what the big picture is. And that first thing is thinking about what you can take control of. So that can even be as simple as you're really not liking the pen you're using to write on something right now. So you're gonna go find a new one. And that helps a lot. It'll make you a lot happier. That's practicing positivity right there. And Lena, I'll
Yeah,
let you
and the
take the
other
next
thing
two.
is simply smile. Okay, and the other thing is simply smiling more. So putting a genuine smile on your face. I know me and Andrew tend to smile a lot, and that, in a sense, really helps. So keep smiling, feel it in your cheeks, like Chuck E. Cheese, the good times, and just always try to smile whenever you have time. The other thing is practicing positive self-talk. And so self-talk, even though it might be silly, like talking to yourself or like going in front of a mirror or asking yourself daily questions, is it really puts a different perspective. And so, like for example, me going right now and saying, I feel so great today, I'm gonna do great. Look at the sunshine, look at the birds chirping, could really change the mood and change your mindset for sure.
Yeah, and both of those things, the self-talk and the smile, they can feel a little bit manufactured sometimes at first, but if you just start with it, and it might feel weird at first and continue, it'll start to feel normal and like a everyday part of your life and very genuine and like part of you. So, all right. There's that for you, Lena.
Okay, so I know we said a lot of quotes today, and one quote that really stood out and related to this presentation is happiness is a mood, positivity is a mindset. And so what that quote means to me is that being positive is something that you could really control and you set for yourself. So it's more about the mind and how you see things and think things. Like, for example, if I wake up today, I'm like, oh, I don't feel good. I could, 5 minutes later, I could be like, no, I actually feel great and it's going to be a good day. And so just wanted to throw that little quote in there. But now it's for the interactive piece of this presentation and the fun part. To really like take action, I think I wanted to set up a little scavenger hunt. And so to find something in your house or even a person or an animal that really makes you feel positive or puts a smile onto your face. Either you could type it in the chat or you could unmute and share. I'll give you guys a couple of minutes, like 5 minutes to find those things. So on your marks, get ready, set, go. Also go find
And whenever
something.
you guys find those things, feel free to pop them in the chat or show them on your video. I know my big positive thing is my tea mug with the sun on it. I drink tea all day long and it makes me happy.
So we're just supposed to find something that makes us feel positive?
Yeah, something in your space that makes you smile, makes you feel positive, something that if you look at it, it's kind of that thing that can turn your day around if you need that.
It's gonna be
I
my
love seeing all the cats. I think
candles.
candles.
Oh, I love
Yes.
candles. Caroline, funny fact, is I actually brought my fluffy cat. His name is Fluffy, and I always like to I always like to squeeze him whenever I feel down or he's just like so fluffy. And then the other thing
Oh my
guys
God, that's so cute.
I know. He's a favorite.
Oh my God.
And then the other thing, I saw you guys bringing candles, and so my sister wasn't feeling well and she's sleeping right now, but my candle has a picture of me and my sister when we were younger. And so I just love to like look at it. It smells good, gives me good memories. So, and then the other thing was I love chocolate. I'm probably addicted to sweets. I'm like, I have a sweet tooth, but those are like my things that make me happy. I'm seeing the cat.
Jesus says he's got music on his phone, paper to draw on, running shoes because he likes to run. Those make him feel happy. I love those. And Philip, you said your cat, dog, and coffee. And oh my gosh, coffee is so helpful too. And I have 2 COVID pups that I love to be around as well. So music is such a good one. And you guys can feel free to continue throwing those little items in the chat. I'm just going to kind of switch to our last little thanks slide here so you guys can grab our emails and the game code if you want. Now's a great time to share any last little stories or questions you might have. So it's totally open discussion. Feel free to chime in.
Yeah, and feel
Oh,
free
the violin, that's awesome.
Yeah, I know I play the violin too. And feel free to like email us, take a screenshot, and we would love to like hear more of your stories and get to meet you all.
Lauren, that picture